Good afternoon. I think you can hear me. Welcome to the monthly clinical meeting organized by the Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians. As you know, every month we are discussing an important topics, and usually we may focus about some sort of clinical topics. But as you know, now the councils of the Pediatric College, Sri Lanka College of Pediatrics has been changed, and the theme for this year, 2021 and 2022, is mainly focused on research. Our theme is in a quest towards clinical excellence through research. So because of that, during the next monthly clinical meeting, especially during this year, we are mainly try to focus on research. So I we thought that this is one of the important area we have to discuss, and maybe we have forgotten during the last few years. So to begin with, today we are focusing about the general approach to the pediatric research from A to Z. Today we have very special young researcher with outstanding track records. He is Professor Sachith Mettananda, and he's a professor and the head of the Department of Paediatrics at University of Kelaniya, and he is also a consultant pediatrician at Colombo non-teaching hospital Ragam. So he is very, very relevant to discuss about this topic. He is a leading researcher in pediatric red blood cell disorders and thalassemia, and has conducted several preclinical, translational, and clinical research studies in collaborating with the universities of Oxford and Cambridge in UK. And he also has authorized over 70 scientific publications, and especially they are in high impact journals like include Blood, Nature Communications, British Journal of Hematology, and Nature Scientific Reports. And he has also won many awards for outstanding research, including President's Award for Scientific Publications in 2011, 15, 16, and 2018 also. And he also awarded as one of the 10 Outstanding Young Persons Award in 2016. He is also an associate editor of BMC Pediatrics and an editorial board member in Ceylon Medical Journal and Sri Lanka Journal of Childhood. I am sure that he is one of the best persons, especially young researcher, who can discuss about this topic and make some platform to discuss research during next few months of our pediatric college, especially making some foundations to our main focus of research. And if you have any questions, you also can ask questions, especially use the chat option or Q&A option of this WebEx. It's in the right hand downside corner of this. It's a great pleasure to have Professor Sachith Mettananda. Over to you, Sachith.
Thank you, Channa, for the kind introduction. I hope all of you can hear me and see my screen and probably myself, the video. Am I right?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you and see me.
Yeah, and let me thank the Council of Sri Lanka, new Council of the Sri Lanka College of Pediatricians for inviting me to this talk, as well as to considering pediatric research as the primary sort of a theme during the coming year. So as Channa said, the talk today would be quite different to what you have been sort of listening to over the past few years. And again, I'm sure most of you would be trainees in pediatrics, if not pediatricians, and you would have listened to many talks on research methodology, research, a general medical research during your medical school days, as well as during your postgraduate training. But what I'm going to talk to you today during the next 45 minutes or so would be quite different to what you have been listening. And this will be an unorthodox talk. It's a sort of a, will give you some important, I hope, will give you some important tips in actually conducting research related to pediatrics. So there won't be any much of theory, but the practical aspect of pediatric research. And I'm trying to cover from beginning to the end. Right. So before we move on, I hope you see the second slide of mine. So the slides have moved in.
Yes, Aditya, you can go on.
Thank you. So why do we need to do research? Why do we need to do research? So if I ask from this audience, I think most of you say, if you are pediatric trainees, I need to do a research for my board certification. If you are in a university, maybe you need to do research for your academic promotions. So the sort of well-known saying in universities is publish or perish. So you need to do some research if you want to sort of get your academic promotions. Some of you would like to do research to improve your CV, whereas some might consider, because it's financially profitable these days as well, you get some allowance for doing research when you are in the government sector. For your research allowance, you may do some research. And others may want to be famous. Whatever the reason you have for you to do research, in generally, medical research should be to answer a clinical question. You need to have an unanswered clinical question to do a research. Otherwise, what you are doing will be useless. Oh, and it should advance the science. Most of us have forgotten that medicine is a science. What we practice is clinical medicine, and truly, a medicine is a science. If If not for the science part of medicine, you will never get a vaccine within a year to combat COVID-19. How much clinical work you do, you will not be able to improve the care if not for the scientific part of the medicine. So medicine is a science, and that science should advance. So for that, we need to do research. So those are the basic things that we need to do research. Before we go into sort of think of doing a research, we need to understand there are different levels of research that people can do. We should select a research study that is suitable to our level of capabilities, our level of competence. The highest level of research may be multi-center, multinational studies. Most clinical trials will fall into this category. We are having a dengue vaccine trial in some centers in this country. That's a multi-center, multinational research. If you want to start this sort of a thing, you have to be highly competent in research and should have a very good track record. Plus, you need to have a lot of money. There can be national level research, like in several centers in Sri Lanka, you do research, same research, national level. Again, for you to do this, you have to be quite skillful in research. The lower grade or sort of lower level research, I won't say this lower grade, but lower level research that most of us do are either collaborative research, where you have an important collaboration between your local collaborators, maybe two universities get together, or as we commonly do with a foreign university. We have collaborations with University of Oxford and Cambridge, and most of the universities in Sri Lanka have foreign collaborations. You can, as a team, we do research. Or you might consider as an individual, even a single person can consider doing a research, individual research. There are no academic qualifications for you to embark in research. If you have an MBBS, if you know how to do it, you can conduct a research and do it to the best of your ability or sort of a maximum ability. The other aspect of research is people do research for postgraduate degrees. If you take a DPhil in University of Oxford and University of Cambridge, or a PhD in any other university, or an MPhil, that's basically completely research. Because we do lot of clinical work, we are not very used to this academic postgraduate work. But in all other fields, including engineering, including computer science, including arts, the postgraduate degrees are research oriented. If you do a PhD, that means you will be doing research for 3 to 4 years. What most of you would do is to sort of complete the research component of your MD Pediatrics, which is a clinical degree. Why have the PGIM introduced the research component? Because it invariably adds adds value to your MD Pediatrics degree. So if you add value, PGM has made it compulsory that all MD trainees undergo a research. However, the type of research and the intensity of research that you do is much less than a PhD or an MPhil. We need to understand that what we expect, what the PGM expects from you is to do a basic type of a clinical research as the research component of your MD. So before we embark on that, we need to sort of clearly should know what the limitations are, what level of research competencies are required. When we move on to the types of research, so what are the different types of research that we can do in clinical medicine and pediatrics? Most of the research that we do and that we call research by itself are original research. So we do this study for the first time in this place, and we are not doing something that someone else has done. They can be done in hospitals, in the community, or in laboratories. So if you would like to do a research on maybe to find out the reasons for anemia in children who are anemic, that becomes a hospital-based clinical research. If you want to try some new medicine in a trial, randomized trial, that becomes a hospital-based clinical research. On the other hand, if you want to find out the prevalence of malnutrition in the community, right, you will have to do a community-based research. Similarly, there will be laboratory-based preclinical research. For example, if you take the COVID-19 vaccine was initially developed in laboratories by medical scientists in preclinical research. So those are the three broad categories of research that people can do. Then you have systematic reviews, which are really not research. You review the literature in a systematic way and analyze and present it. Basically, you do it in the computer. You sit down and do it in the computer. And I'm not going to talk much on these systematic reviews. The other type of clinical research that we can do in the board are clinical audits. So they're not really research by its word. The clinical audits are the things that you would do generally in a single unit or a single hospital to find out whether the clinical work that we do are in accordance with the expected standards or guidelines. For example, you might consider doing a clinical audit on the management of fever among your patients, or maybe the antibiotic use. So management of dengue hemorrhagic fever, just to find out whether the patients have been managed according to the guidelines. If not, what were the deficiencies and what corrective measures can be taken, and you have to take those corrective measures. If you are doing a clinical audit, it has to complete the clinical audit cycle. Those are done to improve the clinical management outcome. In the next part of my talk, I'm going to concentrate mainly on this original research. And that is what you are expected to do if you are an MD trainee to fulfill your requirement in MD Pediatrics. And that is what we generally call as research. There's no barriers for to do systematic reviews. Clinical audits are very important and there are no barriers, but my talk today will focus mainly on original research. So what are the different original research study designs that people can use to do their research? Whatever the research that you do will fall into one of these study designs. Basically, research studies are broadly divided into two groups, descriptive studies and analytical studies. And the easiest studies are descriptive studies that will just describe the available situation, existing situation. So generally, they take the form of either surveys or qualitative studies. But we generally do mostly are surveys. If you want to know the knowledge of patients coming to a certain clinic on the management of fever or weaning practices or breastfeeding, maybe knowledge and attitude, all these are descriptive studies and they take the form of surveys. They are very easy to perform and they are very simple. Qualitative studies are generally done in psychology and psychiatry, and we are not very competent. Even I don't know how exactly to do a qualitative study. So that's a less robust studies. They sort of do some focus group discussions, interview patients, not a methodical sort of a standard way, and then present their findings. So we generally don't do that sort of research in pediatrics. But surveys, CAP studies, that means knowledge, attitude, and practices, those are known as CAP studies, are quite commonly done in pediatrics, and they might add a bit of a value when it comes to improving clinical care. The second group, or the more advanced group of studies, are analytical studies. Rather than describing the situation, you try to analyze and find out the reasons and those sort of things in these studies. Analytical studies broadly are divided into two groups. They can be observational studies or experimental studies. In observational studies, you don't do any intervention. You just observe what's happening and assess. Whereas in experimental studies, which are also known as interventional studies, you intervene, you do some specific treatment and look the outcome. Observational studies are divided broadly into three based on the timing of the research into cross-sectional, case control, and cohort studies. The cross-sectional studies are a cross-section of the time point. So it will be done only in a single time point. For example, if you want to describe the nutritional status, that will be a descriptive part, and to analyze the factors affecting malnutrition in children, what you can do is you can recruit all patients coming to a particular clinic, immunization clinic in the community, and measure their growth parameters, and then identify children with malnutrition and those who don't have, and check their sort of any risk factors, so those things can be examined. That's a cross-sectional study. The same study can be in a different way as a case control study. In that, you would recruit, you will have the data of malnutrition beforehand, and you recruit certain number of children with malnutrition, and then generally a similar number of children without malnutrition as control group. So you recruit two different groups independently, cases and controls, and then look at the risk factors. So the same study can be done in two ways, either a cross-sectional or a case control study. The cohort studies are prospective studies. So it's not a single time point. When you are doing a cohort study, you have to follow your patient or a participant cohort for a longer duration. For example, if you take the same sort of a nutritional example, you can study a cohort of patients, children who are coming to the well baby clinic, and then follow them up for a year and see what nutritional problems they develop, what problems, whether they develop anemia. So that's a follow-up of a cohort of children coming to the pediatric clinic. Similarly, you can follow up patient cohorts. If I have a large number of patients with thalassemia, I can follow that cohort for maybe 10 years and to see what complications, what problems they develop. That's known as, those are cohort studies, which are prospective studies. So those are the basic observational studies. It can be the cross-sectional, case control, or cohort studies. The other group, more advanced group, is interventional or experimental studies. And the most experimental studies are randomized. That means you do an intervention. Maybe you give a new drug. Maybe you give a drug to a sort of a disease condition and see whether there is an improvement. For that, you need to do an experimental study. So currently, we are doing a clinical trial on hydroxyurea in patients with beta thalassemia. We do it as a randomized trial. So that means using a specific method, we randomize patients after recruiting into treatment or control arm. Treatment group will get the hydroxyurea. In certain studies, control arm will not get anything, nothing. So then it is not a placebo controlled arm. But what we are doing is we will give a placebo to the control arm. That means it's a placebo controlled randomized trial. You can do it as an open label. That means the patient who gets the drug will know I'm getting hydroxyurea, the other one will know this is not a useless drug. That's an open label. But the most advanced and the well-recognized method is double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized clinical trials, where you make the tablet equal in appearance, size, shape, everything, but the inside ingredient is different. One has hydroxyurea, the other has nothing. So that becomes a double-blind when the patient does not know, and as the outcome adjudicators, so the people who are doing the study will also not know. The drugs will be packaged in a third-party location, and they will only know who is getting hydroxyurea or not. So those are randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. Non-randomized trials are there, but not very commonly used. So if we take pediatric research that we do as clinicians, they can either take a form of descriptive surveys, can be cross-sectional, or case control, or randomized double-blind trials. We rarely do qualitative studies, we rarely do cohort studies, and we rarely do non-randomized trials. So whatever we do will fall into one of those four categories. Right. So the next part is to find out how exactly to do a research study. If you have not done a research at all, this will be useful. Even if you have done some research, I hope this will be useful. This will exactly tell you the practical aspect of doing a research study. I will be elaborating on these topics one by one, but the sequence is you need to have a research idea. Then you need to read around it. So do a bit of literature search. Then decide what exactly you want to do. Develop your objective. Then you need to have a research team, few people. Develop a proposal in writing. There are some approvals that you need to take. Grants are generally not required. Most of the research will not consume a lot of money. You have to prepare your logistics, prepare for the research, then perform, do your research. The research cycle will not end here. Then you have to analyze your data, interpret the data, and as the first thing for a beginner, you need to present your findings in a scientific forum as an oral or poster presentation. If you are doing this for a MD pediatrics, then you have to submit a report to the PGIM. If you are not, then there's no need of report writing. But the research, doing the whatever you have done will end only if you write a full manuscript, a paper, and submit to a reputed journal and get it published. So unless you publish your research in a full paper, your research is not complete. So we'll go one by one. First thing, you need to have an idea. Some people are very good at it. Some are not so good at it. So you have to guess which group of person I am. But everyone can do research. Generally, the research ideas appear when you do your day-to-day clinical practice. So when you see patients, for example, we have done some research on readmissions of neonates. If you see neonates after being discharged, 2 days later they come back. And some get readmitted. So that's not so nice. So you need to find out the reasons behind. Or if you observe that everyone in this ward has anemia, if you do a full blood count and the blood picture, everyone has got anemia. This can't be right. There's some problem. Then you have to find out the reasons for this, or whether there are what are the causes. Likewise, during your clinical practice, you tend to get some problems which are unanswered. To solve those, you can design a research. Sometimes these ideas come when you teach someone. There are some intelligent medical students, they might question you, and you might not the answer. You read, and the answer is not there. So many things that we don't know. So there's some good idea to do a research. Research ideas will come while you read literature, or maybe when you attend the conferences. Someone will present the data, and you might see the way they have done this is not right. So we should do it in a different way to make it more important and scientifically correct. And it's also not that wrong or not that bad to replicate someone else's work. If someone has identify reasons for readmission in India, you can do the same study in Sri Lanka to see whether the reasons are different. Things may be different to India or maybe to UK to Sri Lanka. So replicating someone else's research in a different context would also be considered as valid. So you can do the same. So generally, no idea is stupid. Everything. So whatever, when you think about a research idea, you think, oh, it's not so. There may be something that we don't know on this. So it's everything is important, right? Nothing is bad. Originality is important, but you can't find things that nobody has touched. If you travel around the world, most of the places people have gone. So if you it's same in research. Most of the things have been done, but there are so many things that we don't know. That will be a very small thing. So idea is important. Then when you have an idea, you need to find out actually whether this is important or not. You need to do a small literature search to find out what has been done in other countries, maybe in Sri Lanka, regarding this. Where to search? Just doing a Google search is not recommended. If you search Google for anything, you get everything. Half of it is truth, half is false information. So just Google search is not recommended. What I would suggest is to search in the PubMed, where you will get only the reputed journal publication. If you want to search Google, then you have to change your Google to Google Scholar. That's like you get Google Maps, and there is an icon for Google Scholar. You click that and do the search in Google Scholar, and only the scholarly articles will appear, not rubbish. So those are the places where you can search. Seeing the abstract is probably enough most of the time. But it's always good to read 2 or 3 good full journal articles doing quite similar to what you have done. If you can't get the access, there are so many librarians that you can help, or maybe friends outside. And there's a thing called Sci-Hub, which provides access. Sci-Hub, which provides access to most of the articles which we don't have access to. So you can get it through Sci-Hub. Earlier, if you go back 20 years time, the searches were done manually in libraries, but nowadays no one is doing manual searches. So even the local literature can be searched in internet, right? So most local journals are published in Sri Lanka journals online, and that will appear in Google, right? If you want to search for Sri Lankan journals, Sri Lanka journals online is a specific website where you get all the local journals. Next is to identify, so there may be different articles written by various people, but you would like to read good article. How to identify a good article before reading? One is by looking at the journal which is published. The reputed journals are indexed, we will come back to it, and you have to look at the impact factor of the journal. I will be sort of describing it later. And the reputation of the authors are also important, is assessed by what is known as an H index. So what's this indexing? There are so many journals in scientific literature, hundreds and thousands of journals, but not all are not good journals. If that particular journal is indexed or is included in any of these indexes, that becomes a good journal. The best index is Science Citation Index, expanded. And for example, just one journal published in Sri Lanka is indexed to Science Citation Index, which is also not a medical journal, which is a journal of National Science Foundation. Even the Ceylon Medical Journal is not indexed. So the Science Citation Index has only the best journals. The next is PubMed. So if it is indexed in PubMed, this is only for medical journals, that's again a good journal. Example, Ceylon Medical Journal, CMJ, is indexed in PubMed, but not the Sri Lanka Journal of Childhood or the College Journal. The other index that we commonly use is Scopus. If the journal is indexed to Scopus, yes, again, not so bad, but not as good as Science Citation Index or PubMed. Sri Lanka Journal of Child Health is indexed to Scopus, which is again a good achievement, but we want it to be indexed in PubMed sooner, and we are trying hard for it. So if the article is published in a journal which is indexed to any of these indexes, then that's probably a good journal article. Whether it's the best or not, then you have to assess the impact factor of the journal. Impact factor of a journal means how many times a particular article has been cited. That means people have read it and used this in their own research, cited by other authors, right? Higher the impact factor, better the journal. The very high impact factors are seen in two best medical journals, New England Journal of Medicine, which has an impact factor of 74. That means each article published in the New England Journal of Medicine will have been cited 74 times in an year. So that means it gives us a 2-year impact factor. For example, if you have 100 articles published in New England Journal of Medicine in 2017 and 18, and there are 1,000 citations in the year 2019 from those articles. Those articles are cited 1,000 times. So 100 articles are cited 1,000 times. So 1,000 divided by 10, the impact factor will become 10. So more the articles are cited, better the article. That is the standard reputation in scientific literature. Nature is a science journal which has an impact factor of 42. Pediatric journals are generally, they don't have very high impact. The highest impact factor is seen in JAMA Paediatrics, Journal of American Medical Association. Archives of Diseases in Childhood is the journal published by the Royal College of Pediatricians, Pediatrics and Child Health, which has an impact factor of just 3. None of the local journals, even the CMJ, it does not have an impact factor. It has an impact factor, if at all, is less than 1. So if the journal has an impact factor of more than 1, that's generally a good journal. The H index, I'm not going to talk in detail, is how the researchers are categorized. Best researchers will have higher H indexes. So these are the most recent H index of the scientific authors. The highest one has 300. That means he has 300 publications which have been cited by other people 300 times. Generally, a H index of more than 20 is considered good. If someone has more than 20 publications cited more than 20 times, sort of that's a good H index. So H index means how many journal articles you have cited the same number of times. H index of 5 means he has authored 5 articles which have been cited 5 times or more. So by looking at the H index, impact factor, and the indexing, you can find out whether the article is a good article or not before reading it. Because anything can be. Science is not always very honest. We will come to it. But so you have to find out whether it's coming from a reputed person. So that's the literature search. So after you read around your area, then you have to be very clear on what you want to do. Mokadda mama making Hwang. That is your objective. So maybe to find out, maybe to analyze the risk factors for anemia in children aged between 6 months to 2 years. So it has to be very specific. So you need to have a very good, very clear on what you want to find out. The risk factors for severe acute malnutrition in children living in a particular area. So that is your general objective, which then can be divided into few specific objectives. Then you need to have a good research team, few people, right? You will not always need a supervisor, right? If you think you are competent, you can do your own research. No one will find out. No one will question if you are competent. How did you do without the supervision of a consultant? Even some medical officer can do research. There's no restrictions, right? So you might have collaborators, colleagues, and some research assistants. Then the difficult part of it for most of you is we need to develop a research proposal. Most of the time, written research proposal is important because nowadays we need to take ethical approval to all research that we do. For you to get ethical approval, we need to have a research proposal. In addition, if you are doing it for PGIM, the PGIM has to approve your research proposal. So writing a research proposal, this talk is not regarding that, but I will give some important tips in writing the research proposal. The general outline of a research proposal is a title, introduction, objectives, methods. That's it. It doesn't have to be very long. Maybe altogether 5 pages is more than enough. When I say 5 pages, I'm referring to A4 size, double spaced, 12 font size. Not very much. Introduction should include the background of the disease or whatever the condition you are going to do the research on and existing sort of available knowledge that includes the literature survey. I recommend not to have a separate literature survey. You can have it included in the introduction itself. Maximum 2 pages, but has to be quite clear. The objectives has to be very clear, and you need to have one general objective and few specific objectives. And the method we are going to do, although there are so many aspects into the research methodology, but they are very short design, whether it's a descriptive study, cross-sectional analytical, case control, or setting where you are going to do in the Kalambuni teaching or LRH, wherever period, maybe whatever the study population, all patients admitting to the unit, or maybe all patients coming to the clinic, whom you would exclude. Sample size calculation is a tricky area that most of you will find difficult to do. But to be honest, there are so many ways, so many things that you can learn from internet itself. Sample size calculation depends on your study design. There are ways to calculate sample size for descriptive studies. If you search in Google search, there will be different ways. And there are online sample size calculators. So just say you are doing a case control study and the prevalence of whatever, you get the sample size. Those are accepted, right? Sampling techniques, and I'm not going to go into detail in each of these, but you need to have a data collection instrument, which is generally the questionnaire, and that's it. The referencing has to be quite accurate. We will come back to that. and the annexes will have questionnaires, patient information sheet, and written consent is generally required in most of the research that we do nowadays. The important thing is to get the first draft quite quickly. You don't need to be perfect in the first place, but that first draft has to be written within 1 or 2 days. Whatever that you have in your mind should be in paper. Then you can develop the questionnaire around that, and you will probably, if the questionnaires are self-administered, if you give the questionnaire to the patient or the parents, then you have to translate them into Sinhalese and Tamil. If not, if you are filling the questionnaire, the questionnaires are interviewer administered, there's no reason for you to translate, right? But the patient information sheet consent form should be in the language most convenient for the patient. So you need to have those in all 3 languages. And you redefine your task. And again, when you submit your proposal, maybe for ethical approval, maybe for PGM approval, you try to get the best you can, but you may not be perfect. You can never be perfect, right? But when you submit it to whatever the sort of requirement, it will be reviewed by some, and the reviewers will always give some comments. Nothing will be accepted in the first place when it comes to research. And you do those revisions, and okay. There are certain softwares that will help you to do this quite efficiently. When it comes to referencing, manually doing references are quite hard. Nowadays, people don't do that. The best software is known as EndNote, but it is expensive. If you are doing research very frequently, you need to purchase that. There are other online free software like RefWorks, which can be easily learned and will help you to get the references right. Other important software is Grammarly. I recommend that very much. That will be helpful even when you write emails. If you have Grammarly, some of those components are free of charge. Some you have to pay a small amount. It will pick your grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes much better than the MS Word would be. So Grammarly is an important software for every one of us to have, I would say. If you are not very sure whether you are going to do it alone without the supervision, are there places for you to get help? Yes, there are. But the only thing is, this is your research, you have to be quite self-motivated, right? So other people will not do your own research. So you have to be quite self-motivated and get the help. I personally have helped more than 15 to 20 pediatricians, pediatric trainees to get through the research. So some are senior to me, some are my batchmates, some are quite junior to me. And I know there are a few other people who do the same, so you can approach one of those. And importantly, the College of Pediatricians this year the theme is research. So the College of Pediatricians is going to have a research support group, which will be probably sent to notified to you soon. And that support groups will support whatever the research that's being done in pediatrics. If you need any help, and we are there to support. So that support is available. One other important thing when you write the proposal is to avoid plagiarism. What is plagiarism? Plagiarism. These things were not there. Maybe 10 years before, no one was bothered about plagiarism. And even the reputed researchers were just take some pieces from internet, cut and paste, and then reference that article, which is not accepted nowadays. Plagiarism is presenting someone else's language, thoughts, ideas, or expressions as one's own original work. So if you take one sentence from an article and give the article credit by referencing, still that is considered as plagiarism. You have to write every sentence by yourself. Never ever cut and paste from internet, even to introduction to anywhere, right? So it will be picked up. There are very sophisticated plagiarism software which will survey your proposals which will survey your publications when they are submitted, maybe for PGIM approval, maybe for publication. So if the similarity index is more than 20, that is considered that is too high, right? So everything you have to write by yourself. Don't cut and paste. Otherwise, if you do that, there won't be plagiarism. I'm sure no one will write exactly in the same way two things. So plagiarism softwares are very good at picking those things. Once you have your proposal ready, you need to get some approvals. Nowadays, ethical approval is a must. When I first doing research about 20 years before as a demonstrator, not really 20 years, about 16, 17 years before as a demonstrator in the pediatric department of Colombo, we were not taking ethical approval for all the research, right? So ethics committees were actually non-existent. No one required ethical approval. But times have changed. Nowadays, every research involving human participants, you need to do ethical approval. You need to take ethical approval. Whether it is required for clinical audits or not, questionable. But always, if you are in doubt, always it's better to get the ethical approval beforehand rather than doing the research and waiting with finding it difficult to publish because you haven't got the ethical approval. Where to get the ethics approval? When it comes to research in pediatrics, the Sri Lanka College of SLCP is the easiest and the best and the efficient place to get ethical approval. When I say easiest, that means they give it very easily, but that means they look at it in a pediatric aspect. So if there is no major harm to a child, your research will be approved and it's quite efficient. There is a website for SLCP Ethics Committee and you can download all the forms and you can even submit electronically. If not, there are institutional ethics committees. Every university, medical faculty will have ethics committee, major hospitals will have ethics committee. You have to take ethical approval from one of those places. Then you need to take administrative approval. If you are going to do this in the hospital, you need to take the approval from the director. If it is in the field, MOH or RDH should approve your project. If you are doing your research for PGIM, MD, Pediatrics as the research component, then you need to take the board of study approval before embarking on the research. So 3 places where you need to get your research approved. If you are doing a clinical trial, there are certain other approvals that you need to take. Any clinical trial should be registered in a clinical trial registry. There is a Sri Lanka clinical trial registry run by Sri Lanka Medical Association, and your trial should be registered there. And you need to take the approval from the NMRA, National Medicinal Regulatory Authority, before starting a clinical trial. But most of you will not be doing clinical trials, so these are not really important. Grants are not always required. Most of us do research by our own money because writing the grant application is again a cumbersome procedure and grants are quite limited and quite difficult to get. But if you want to get a grant, getting a grant is also important when it comes to your CV. It will show that you have been given money by someone to do a research, means they trust you that you do a good job. International grants are difficult to obtain unless you have foreign collaborators. The local places for you to get grants, if you are really interested, National Research Council, they call for applications yearly. You can go to get up to 5 million, but you need to have a good track record beforehand. National Science Foundation gives up 1 to 2 million, but they generally are hesitant to fund medical research. They are giving money basically to basic sciences. If you are in a university, UGC and universities have certain research grants, maximum 300,000. If you are a pediatrician or pediatric trainees, one important place that you can write the application is the SLCP. They have the Stella de Silva research grant, which is given yearly, and 3 grants are generally given, maximum 150,000. Even if it is a small project, you can apply. Sri Lanka Medical Association will also have a grant scheme, SLMA research grant, maximum 100,000. It's quite they are awarded all the time. So and not very many applicants. So that's something that you can look for. But it's not essential. Grants are not essential. So once you have got all the approvals, you prepare logistics, right? You have to run that research in your mind. You do it on your mind. And then you basically embark on the research. Whatever the research you do, you have to be again self-motivated. You have to take trouble. This is something extra you do, but other thing important is to be honest when you do research. People try to fill the questionnaires by themselves and get the data, change the data, which are not really good. Intellectual dishonesty is considered as a crime. There has been incidents all over the even during the COVID pandemic. I don't know whether you remember, it shows the hydroxyurea increases mortality. And because of this article, so many trials were stopped, but later on found to have, they were giving some false data. So next I'm going to run a video which shows the importance of research. I hope you will hear the sound. Let's try. If it is not, just raise your hand or tell me that you can't hear. Hope you see.
Research fraud refers to cases where data were either fabricated or falsified to provide false support for the researcher's hypothesis. Fabrication means the data were never collected, but were made up. Falsification means existing data were illegitimately altered, including manipulating research materials, images, data, equipment, or processes. Falsification also includes changing or omitting data or results in such a way that the research is not accurately represented. For example, a person might falsify data to make it fit with the desired end result of a study. In 1998, physician Andrew Wakefield published a study in The Lancet, claiming that his research indicated a connection between autism and the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. This research was highly respected and undermined public confidence in the vaccine, leading to many parents refusing the shot. Ultimately, this led to increases in the number of cases of measles and mumps in the US and Europe, with some areas reporting very dangerous and widespread outbreaks. When faced with an investigation in 2010, it was revealed that Wakefield and his colleagues had altered facts about the children in their study, and Wakefield had even been paid off by a lawyer planning to sue the manufacturer of the vaccine. The British General Medical Council found Wakefield guilty of fraud and misconduct. In 2006, Korean researcher Hwang Woo-suk was found to have fabricated a series of experiments in stem cell research, a field in which he was once considered one of the pioneering experts. He was previously famous for his 2 Science Journal articles in which he reported success in creating human embryonic stem cells through cloning, but is now infamous for his massive case of fraud and scientific misconduct after it was revealed that much of his stem cell research had been faked. Hwang was charged with embezzlement and bioethics law violations, for which he was sentenced to a 2-year suspended prison sentence and barred from engaging in stem cell research by the South Korean government, as well as fired from his position with Seoul National University. However, Hwang continues to lead research in creating embryonic stem cell lines from cloned pig embryos, and his lab has been actively publishing manuscripts on PubMed. In January 2014, Haruko Obokata from the Riken Center for Developmental Biology in Kobe, Japan, published 2 papers describing the method, called stimulus-triggered acquisition of pluripotency in nature. But they were retracted in July after Nature discovered that the papers included plagiarized writing, misidentified images, and misreported data. Haruko Obokata, the lead author, who performed the studies and wrote the manuscripts, was found guilty of falsifying data. Biologist Yoshiki Sasai, leader of the Riken Research Group, was a co-author on both papers. He was criticized for his poor supervision. During the investigation, Sasai committed suicide at the Riken Center. In 2016, a group of
Right. I hope you heard that. So that video clearly shows how dangerous it could be and why it is not really, you should not even think of doing dishonest research. So there's no, you are not going to gain anything, and you will do harm general public, to the scientific community, and maybe to you yourself, because that will be revealed in some day, and you will be sort of in the same situation. So do your research honestly. So after you perform the research, you need to enter your data. So and I'm going to run through this quite quickly, because by this time, if you have come to that stage, you will anyway be sort of now geared to do the research, and you have to analyze, sort of enter data as you go. SPSS is a good computer package, which is quite expensive, but you can always get a sort of a unauthorized copy easily in this country. Excel is again good, and you can do a lot of analysis in Excel, but only thing you need to remember is it's quite error prone. If you enter something in a cell in the Excel, and if you override that, it will change that without asking you. Whereas in SPSS, it might prompt you, and it might not be difficult to have different sort of a different type of characters in SPSS. After you enter your data, you have a database, you have to clean that data, make sure that everything is entered correctly, and then analyze your data. The analysis you can do by yourself. SPSS is something very easy, and that is something anyone can learn on its own, by their own. So initial descriptive analysis, the percentages and those things are not very difficult, and you can get the mean of age and standard deviations, and you might perform certain statistical tests. These are very, very basic idea what statistical tests can be done. The basic statistical test depends on your variable type. So categorical variable and a categorical variable. If you want to sort of compare the prevalence of anemia in different sexes. Sex is a categorical variable. Prevalence of anemia is again a categorical variable. Yes or no, male or female. The test that you should be using is chi-square test, which will give a p-value. If you want to compare the distribution of continuous variable with a categorical variable, for example, the hemoglobin in both males and females is a categorical variable. Hemoglobin is a continuous variable. So you compare the means of which using student's t-test. If you want to compare the association between, to find out the association between two continuous variables, for example, height of a child, height, and maybe the BMI, or maybe the hemoglobin. Both are continuous variables, then what you should be using is Pearson's correlation. All these tests will give you p-values. But there are so many limitations to these tests which you need to know, but this is sort of beyond this talk. These are all known as parametric tests, where you expect the data to show the normal distribution. If the data does not show normal distribution, you have to use different tests. And if you want to exclude the effect of other confounders, for example, you are checking the prevalence of anemia between males and females. But the anemia may not be only dependent on the sex. That may depend on the income and the diet and everything. And if you want to exclude or look at the relationship between all of these, then you have to do what is known as multiple regression analysis. So that's bit advanced statistics. But even for you, you can do simple statistical tests like chi-square student test and Pearson's correlation if you have a basic knowledge on statistics. Once you have analyzed the data, you need to find out what this data tells you. What exactly have I found, right? For you to find out, sort of, you have to see whether there's anything new or interesting. You have to look at from different angles, and you might have to create different graphs and tables, which some may be useful, some may not be, right? And you need to find out, you need to think. So what have I found, and what story is what does this data tells me, right? Next step is to present your findings, the initial step. If you don't do this, at least, then no point doing your research. Every research should at least have been presented in a scientific forum. For you to present this, you need to submit a small abstract, maximum 250, 300 words, depending on the conference, right? Where to submit these abstracts? Whenever you have a conference, you will be getting emails. Sri Lanka College of Paediatricians, they have annual conferences. SLME has annual conferences, and even international organizations like International Paediatric Association, Asia Pacific Paediatric Association, they all have conferences, and you can submit your abstract. Nowadays, the abstract submission is online, generally free of charge. If you have written your abstract, you can submit. And I assure, if the abstract is sort of written in a decent way, most of these conferences will accept that as at least a poster presentation, right? Getting an oral presentation may be hard in international or local conference, but even the International Paediatric Association will not reject majority of abstracts that are sent to you. In my life, none of the abstracts have been rejected because they need people to come for their conference. The people will not come, not attend, unless the poster that they have submitted is accepted. So when you go to these international conferences, there are thousands of posters, right? Because they generally will not reject an abstract for a poster, right? They will take for posters, and there are no limitations. So even getting a poster in International Paediatric Association from a small research that you've done in Sri Lanka is possible, and it's doable. If you get it accepted, then you have to pay the registration fees and go there, book your ticket, but there are ways that you can find that money as well. There are travel grants offered. Maybe the conference will offer you a travel grant, maybe the National Science Foundation, and there are various places that you can apply for a small travel grant, and that will help you to travel around the world as well. So first thing is to present your data. Then if you are doing this for your MD pediatrics research, the PGI wants you to submit a full research report. There are guidelines, and the same things that I told you in the proposal writing is applicable here. There are places for you to get help. There are softwares to help you, and plagiarism should be avoided. And again, don't try to be perfect. You submit a decent report, and there are reviewers who will always criticize what you have done. That's their job, right? So when someone's report comes to me, I will see in a critical way. Is there any other way that this can be written better, right? So that criticism will go back, and you answer those questions, and you correct and send it back. So that's the report. You always expect some criticism from the reviewers when you submit a report. That is normal. The last step is to publish your research. And this is probably the most difficult bit, time-consuming bit. But if you don't do this, your research is not complete. You have to publish whatever you have found, right? Not just presenting in a forum is not good enough. Not writing the report to PGIM is not good enough. You have to publish it. When you publish, the important thing is to identify a suitable journal. So if you do a small study in one of your hospital, maybe one board in LRH, you write an abstract, the IPA, the International Paediatric Association, will accept it as a poster. That's not a problem. But to get it accepted by a good journal is difficult because they have space constraints. They will take only the important one. If you write to the Lancet, a small article, it will be returned back on the following day. So you need to find out where this research would fit. You can ask from a colleague, experienced person, the good sort of, if it is a randomized trial, I would try to sort of publish at least in sort of you can try Lancet, but not otherwise. If it is a very small fungus, then probably submit to the Sri Lanka Journal of Childhood. And there are so many other journals, even low quality than Sri Lanka Journal of Childhood, which are in Sri Lanka, right? Sri Lanka Journal of Childhood is a rather good journal when it comes to the local context. It will probably is second only to the Ceylon Medical Journal, right? So you have to select the journal and write according to the author guidelines. You prepare the manuscript, and then generally nowadays everything is submitted electronically. And the journal will take some time to give a decision. Most of the time, it will not generally accept straight away. Maybe it will be rejected, but nothing is lost. You submit to some other journal, or otherwise the journal will ask you to revise and send, which you do the revisions and resubmit until you get your research published somewhere. Once you get your research published, you have completed that research cycle. And once you do this full cycle once, then you will be doing it over and over again. If you get one paper published done by yourself, it doesn't mean that you are involved in some data collection and someone getting it published. If you are in the first author, if you done that research by yourself, and if you get it published, then you know exactly what's going on. That's like something like you managing a child with dengue. Unless you manage one child by your own, you will never know how to manage, right? Once you have done it once, you know exactly how things will be, and it is quite easy for you to do that. In neonatal resuscitation, unless you resuscitated the child, you will never know how exactly to do that. Once you have done one, and then you can do many, right? By doing research, you can travel around the world. You will have a very good online presence, right? So if someone writes your name in the Google, you will appear with these publications, and the Google will make a profile for you, Google Scholar profile. And who knows, ultimately you will be gaining some awards, maybe President's Awards, and even the Nobel Prize can be won. Right, so that's the end of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have. Chandra, are there any questions in the chat box, or do we know?
Yeah. At the moment, we don't have questions. If you have any questions, you can use this chat box option. It's a great pleasure that over 100 participants have participated. That shows interest in research, especially pediatric trainees. One thing I just want to ask about this predator journal. Sometimes we are also getting some emails from journals to ask to send our research papers to their journals. How do you identify these things, and what is the impact of if we send some sort of our original work to this type of journal?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and probably no clear-cut answer to your question, Chandra. Predator journals are the journals that will publish articles for money. And there will be always a article processing charge associated with it. And generally, they are not indexed in any of these. And how they act is they send emails to thousands of authors. So if you get one publication in a journal and your email address is there, they will just send, and we are interested in your work, and I invite you to submit to this and that. First thing I would do is to go through the journal website. Sometimes there may not be a journal website, and see whether there are any article processing charges. Right. If there are article processing charges, that means you have to pay to get your work published. There are certain reputed journals that also charge article processing charges, which are known as open access journals. Next, what I would do is to find out this journal, whether it is indexed in any of those indexes which I mentioned. Science Citation Index, PubMed, or Scopus. if it is not indexed in, they will say it is indexed in Google Scholar. Google Scholar will index everything. Google will index everything, right? That doesn't mean it is a good journal. So for me, predator journals are the journals which have an article processing charge. You have to pay money. It's not just few rupees, about thousands of pounds, and which are not indexed in any of those indices. Science Citation Index, PubMed, or Scopus. Then I would not send my article. Most of these journals are there. They accept, they publish as well, but they get money, they publish. But when it comes to the reputation, your article will not have any reputation at all.
Okay, thank you, sir. And we have questions that whether the institutional approval should be taken prior to applying for ethics review committee approval or afterward.
Generally, the ethical approval is the first thing, and then you in the ethics approval you can say administrative approval will be obtained from this. Otherwise, you can do it simultaneously. What I have been suggesting to most of the people I help is to get all approvals together. So you have a proposal, you get the ethics approval, you get the administrative approval, and you write to the PGIM. But now PGIM wants the ethical approval before the trainee submits the proposal, which further lengthens the procedure. But there are no hard and fast rules. You can both either way, or best is to do simultaneous. If you take taking administrative approval takes a bit longer with your administrators, you say ethical approval has been applied from this place, and you can get the approval simultaneously.
Thank you. And I'm sure most of our participants today are pediatric trainees, and one of their major objective is to do a research as a qualification for MD pediatrics. And one has sent a question, said, what is the value of doing retrospective study, probably collecting data from BST for the MD research?
Right. So it's most of these things don't have sort of clear-cut answers. Doing a retrospective study is again fine. I don't see any reason not to do. If you go to UK, most of these sort of some studies are done retrospectively because they do have good databases. But when it comes to local context, most reviewers will not like retrospective studies. I don't know why. And it shows that the trainee is trying to take shortcuts and so on and so forth. And the other problem is we don't have a good medical record system. Our BHDs are generally not complete. So you will probably run into problems by doing retrospective studies, because whatever the information in your data collection form may not be obtained. Then you will run into problems. Then only the dishonesty comes in, and so on and so forth. So I would rather not recommend doing retrospective studies for your MD pediatrics, but there are no specific rules for you not to approve a retrospective study. The chances that the board will not approve is higher when it comes to retrospective studies, claiming that whatever the information you have said in the data collection form cannot be collected. Then that's a valid argument. If those cannot be collected from the BHTs, you can't approve that study.
Yeah, we have another question. Is there a research category called cross-sectional descriptive?
Yes. But I would rather use a descriptive study word all. That's it. Most of the descriptive studies are conducted cross-sectionally. If you say to assess the knowledge and attitude of these patients, the mothers attending clinic, that's a descriptive study. You can really say they are descriptive cross-sectional study, but I would stick to the word descriptive study. That is it.
Okay, Sachith. I think yeah, we have exceeded time now, 1:15. So it was very fruitful. I am sure all of our participants gathered significant knowledge about overall idea of the research, what are the scopes and what are the main areas, and how should they approach for research. So
One
I'm
more
sure this.
thing I
Yeah,
need to
yeah,
have,
yes.
Chapel, because you ask about the predatory journals, and there's a sort of there are so many conferences that might send you emails as well to attend these and join. And be careful. Be careful. Only sort of try to register into a reputed conference. Some of these conferences are generally not held. They will take your money and they will ask to submit an abstract and then give the registration fee, and the conference will not be held. So don't always, I will never try to attend, or I will never try to respond to an email inviting me to attend a conference, or email inviting me to attend a submit an. I will always look for a conference by myself and look for a journal by myself and then submit, because you will lose all your money. It's being so bad nowadays.
Thank you very much, and it would be a very good, very important advice for our participants as well. Okay, so in next few monthly meetings also, we would like to focus on mainly research and rest of the important topics of research. So I am sure that Professor Mettananda has laid very good foundations for those future researchers, future discussions of future monthly critical meetings as well. So this is a time to conclude our monthly critical meeting scheduled to the month of May 2021. And I'd like to thank all of your participants, your enthusiasm and staying all more than hour and enjoying this monthly critical meeting. And I would like to also thanks for our platform provider GSK providing this web platform and always helping us supporting in arrange these monthly clinical meetings. So thank you very much all and have a nice day. Thank you.